Here we go. Today is Sunday, June 11th, 2017, and this is episode 193 of the Defensive Security Podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me tonight, as always, is Mr. Andrew Kellett.
Wow, 2 weeks in a row.
I know.
We're doing well. And hello.
Hello.
Happy Sunday evening to you.
I know. That means tomorrow is Monday.
Does somebody have a case of the pre-Mondays?
Yes. Yep. Anyway, just a reminder that the thoughts and opinions we express on the show are ours and do not represent those of our employers. So
nothing actually blew it up since the last show we had.
It's been eerily quiet, which kind of means something is brewing.
Too quiet.
It's too quiet. It's the calm before the storm.
Somebody's working on a really good logo right now for the next named vulnerability.
Be a song and a spokesperson and the whole shot. Yep.
Mascot.
We're
costume.
Doomed.
Well, how else would you be motivated to buy their Blinky box?
That's true. So true. Well, anyway, getting into our stories. The first one for today comes from CSO Online, and the title is CEO's Risky Behaviors Compromise Security. And, the article goes on to talk about how CEOs and senior executives at companies are want to go and hire their own IT services out. And they point out that study shows 75% of CEOs and more than half of business decision makers admit that they've used applications or programs that are not approved by their IT department. Amazing.
Because, they make the rules.
Yeah, they do. And, the author points out in here that this likely is a relic of the security team not reporting high enough. But I have a different view on this one. This is why I wanted to talk about this one.
Yeah, I figured that would be an interesting point of discussion.
I'm not convinced. I mean, certainly having the security leadership represented higher in the company is usually a good thing and whatnot. But I don't know that this is an IT security problem, right? I think this is an IT problem.
I think this is a leadership problem. and I would say, is it really a problem?
Well,
so let's flip this around. Let's take IT out of it. Let's take security out of it. Yeah. And let's say that we talk about a legal advisor. So the corporation's legal counsel has said, you may not want to do X, Y, Z.
Fair.
But they go do it anyway. So I concur, and I'm sorry, I kind of jumped on your point here, that the assumption that this is the fault of the senior security person not reporting high enough in the organization is sort of predicated on the assumption that the senior leadership will always listen to everything the senior security person says.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas I can see a CEO or senior executive team going, those security guys, all they look at is risk. I'm looking at opportunity. I need to get this done.
Well, exactly right. And I think that's that's where I think it becomes an IT problem, right? If security is kind of hand in glove with IT often, and what this is saying to me at least is that the IT departments aren't supporting, and certainly there's going to be a whole spectrum of different circumstances, but in general, I'm going to guess that this is largely, resulting from IT departments that aren't supporting, the leadership of the company in the way that the leadership of the company thinks they should be supported in terms of, what kinds of applications are needed and so on and so forth. And so if the IT department isn't facilitating that, those leaders are off, doing their own thing. And of course, security is not going to get involved because there's never been a discussion about it. And again, I think that's, so your point is valid. If, leaders are going to go off and take risks that they think are prudent. But I think that this is probably a relationship issue between the leaders and the IT department.
I would say that this is a function of leadership being not understanding the risks they're accepting when they make decisions like this.
Absolutely.
And that, at the end of the day, they're trying to get done what they think is right for the company. And sometimes they want to bend the rules or break the rules or just ignore the rules to get it done because they see the big picture, quote unquote, that nobody else sees.
Right.
And that, their needs and wants are more important, typically, in their mind, than some silly policy.
Right.
And I think that there's also a cultural aspect here of an organization of, is the senior executive staff held to the same policy and process? I think that depends on the industry. If we're talking about something like a highly regulated environment, probably more so than an industry that doesn't have a lot of government oversight and regulation. But,
right.
That's at the end of the day, the CEO is charged with running the organization however they see fit. In many cases, I think that's how they look at it.
Mm-hmm. Rightly so.
So I don't know. I'm struggling with this being a relationship issue, and I see this more of a culture issue.
But if it weren't a relationship issue, wouldn't the CEO go to the CIO and say, "Hey, I want to go do X," and and then help me out with doing X rather? I mean, does it make any sense at all for the CEO to go? I mean, just to make up an example, right? For the CEO to go up and set up Salesforce.com, right? It just doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't that CEO go to his or her CIO and say, "Look, here's what here's what I want to do. Go make it happen."
Well, that's an interesting point. I can think of a couple of reasons. The process is too arduous. It's too complex.
Right. But again, that tells me that the IT process isn't supporting the business in the way that the CEO is expecting.
Yeah, I can agree with that statement. Is it? But I wonder if that particular discussion has ever even been had. What I see so often is this security culture or policy or process becoming entrenched based on momentum.
Right.
And these rules or regulations or whatnot or ways of doing business seem unchangeable, unassailable. And, a lot of folks who've gotten successful in life sometimes have done so by skirting the rules.
Yep.
So I don't know.
Especially in the smaller companies, that's been my experience. They tend to be a little less scrupulous than the average person.
So this is an interesting one, and I think it's absolutely true. I think this is one reason why whenever we exclude senior leadership from things like social engineering tests and phishing tests, and I think we're not doing our business any favors.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. So anyway, I if this is a problem in your organization, I think it really warrants some kind of assessment, and obviously the assessment has to be done by somebody properly placed in the organization. The SOC analyst probably isn't going to go and figure this out in a large enterprise. But if this is a problem, to me, it seems like there needs to be some kind of assessment to figure out, is it the personality of the CEO or whoever's doing this, or is it some structural problem, relationship issue with, between the senior leadership and the IT department, or, what is the cause? So,
yeah. Or perhaps just pure flexibility and ability to get things done.
Right.
And this is why I think shadow IT, with the current ability to spin up entire IT departments with a credit card, is going to get worse.
Oh, absolutely.
And I don't quite know how to fix that yet.
Well, I in some respects, the horse has left the barn, and now the challenge is to figure out how to apply some sanity to it. Right? I'm not sure that we can stop it. I mean, like I said, I think it's, the bell's been rung, and now we have to figure out, how do we wrap the right kinds of things around this so that it, can, the business can move at the speed it wants to move, and also is relatively safe. And honestly, this is the challenge for the next, for the current and next generations of IT and IT security leadership.
Yeah, so I think that's true.
So moving on to our next story, which comes from bleepingcomputer.com. The title here is Ex-Admin Deletes All Customer Data and Wipes Servers of Dutch Hosting Provider. And basically that title is the entire story. Not a lot more to say. So there's a hosting provider in the Netherlands called Verilax. And earlier this past week, apparently, and some of the details are a little sketchy, but apparently a now ex-sysadmin deleted all of the data, apparently off of all of the servers they host for customers. And I guess it's like a KVM and VPS type hosting company. But, what's not clear is if this person was still employed at the time and is now ex, or was, had already left and hadn't had his or her access deleted. That part's not clear at all.
No, I'm sure more of that will come out, but wow. It appears that they are restoring from backups.
Yeah.
It's just going to take a long time.
We were, before we started recording, we were lamenting the GDPR that's coming, and my goodness, I think this would create some GDPR attention. I'll say it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, this is one of those worst case scenarios where you have to trust somebody. Yeah. They seem like a relatively smallish company too, so they have admins who have this much control,
right?
And it's a really, this is a straight up cost versus risk decision. Unless you want to give something like the ability to delete things like this spread out over multiple people that you have, that's just more bodies you have to pay, more people you have to hire. And when you're a small business, it's really tough to do. Yeah,
especially this particular industry, I think has extremely narrow margins.
So this is a tough one. There are times you just have to take that risk of your admins being able to completely screw your business if you're not careful.
Yeah, but assuming that this person was not employed at the time, it does point out the extreme importance of deactivating IDs in a timely manner after someone leaves, especially as sysadmin, and if they left on bad terms. I mean, that I don't think takes a lot of extra cost.
Concur. If that was the case, right. They were fired or left and then came back later and deleted everything. But
we don't know. We don't know about this particular case.
Because we like to report on stories that we have no facts or details on, just so we can wildly speculate.
Absolutely. So I don't know. Have you seen the Twitter account? I think it's called Tabletop Exercises.
I don't think I have, actually.
Yeah, I think it like once a week it posts some kind of a scenario, like an IT disaster type sscenario. And this seems like one of those.
I don't have enough stress in my life, and I already don't have enough trouble sleeping. You want to put that on me?
Well, it's just different scenarios to that you could use in a tabletop. And this seems like one of those scenarios.
Let me repeat what I was told by a very, very experienced CISO for a Fortune 50 company. If I don't know about the problem, I don't have to deal with it.
Yes,
You're just bringing me problems with a Twitter feed like that, buddy.
That's great advice. Wow.
I joke, but that conversation actually happened, and I can't really say much more, but it was stunning.
I understand. There's the difference between negligence and ignorance. Fine line. So anyway,
I will check out that Twitter feed though.
Okay.
Because I like stress, apparently.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Kind of right up our alley, though. So anyway, moving on to our next story, which comes from the Hacker News. And speaking of stress, if you didn't have enough stress, first ever data stealing malware found using Intel AMT tool to bypass firewall. Woohoo! Yeah,
this one's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So AMT, the advanced management technology that I equate to a dumpster fire burning out in front of.
You say that until you need to use it to manage a host in a lights out data center.
Yeah.
Much like Active Directory, it's a useful tool when used properly.
And the burning, smoldering dumpster fire the rest of the time. So anyway, this is not, by the way, this is not the same AMT vulnerability that was reported about like a month ago. This is a whole different issue. So,
and I would argue this isn't necessarily a vulnerability.
It's not as. I think this is article fodder, but I thought one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up was because I'm seeing an interesting shift in the industry away from kind of infrastructure type firewalls to host type firewalls.
Sure.
And in that context, this issue is really problematic.
And so, as I understand it, what's basically happening is once a host has already been compromised, they're using the AMT functionality,
right,
which is, in essence, it's a little mini computer on a separate bus to exfiltrate data.
Right.
To get it around any host controls that may already be present on that device, like a firewall.
Yeah, and so specifically, they're using the serial over LAN component, and
right.
Apparently now, like you said, it's not as devastating as the other AMT issue, which was a complete authentication bypass,
right?
Which, by the way, is still a smoldering tire fire in many data centers because there's not a lot of patches for it. I mean, this is a big problem.
I'm hoping a lot of people didn't actually have it enabled, so it's not as.
Well, you would hope. But again, a lot of data centers would, though, right? I mean, especially the move towards lights out data centers. That's a pretty important component. So
yeah.
Anyway, the issue here is that, as you mentioned, AMT is this completely hardware separate processor, separate I'll call it an operating system, right? But firmware based thing that runs alongside the main processor, and it effectively has its own virtual, or in some cases physical network interface,
right?
And that can be turned on, right, in either the firmware. I think it can be turned on in the operating system, assuming that an attacker has administrative access to the operating system. But the point here is that if you have a Windows-based firewall on the system, the attacker can exfiltrate data around that Windows firewall by exfiltrating the data through this AMT processor using the serial over LAN protocol. Now, as they point out in the article here, that it's not. You actually have to have a username and password to connect to this serial over LAN, and you would obviously need to be able to connect from the internet or from some remote location to that interface. But if all that were lined up in such a just so you would be able to exfiltrate data. It does seem kind of obtuse to me. However, again, we're moving more and more towards a model where the perimeter is shrunk right around the individual servers, and when that happens, and you no longer have network-based firewalls, this kind of thing can come up and bite you in the butt.
Now, what I find interesting too is that this was actually identified in the wild. It wasn't some research project write-up of, "Ooh, look what we found." This is actually being used by a group called Platinum, which apparently is going after government, defense institution, telecom, that sort of thing for the last couple of years. In my mind, I don't mind this AMT technology. I think if it does have a separate interface, you're probably better off putting that on an isolated LAN just for management that probably doesn't have a default route and can't get off that LAN is what I would recommend. But, this might be one that's, a skill set that they kind of bundled into whatever sort of exfiltration code set that they're using to get data off board. But this is interesting. It's another sort of out-of-band methodology that we need to think about.
Indeed. So I also really like the idea of using a separate management interface. I think that's how it really needs to be, which works in the context of a a server, but doesn't work so well in some other contexts.
Yeah, agreed. I'm assuming a server environment in a data center. That's kind of how, at least originally, I understood this to be implemented, but now it's probably been molested into all sorts of different functionality.
Yeah, well, I suspect that the serial over LAN component is probably a highly server, a pretty server specific thing. But I know AMT was, I ran a little Twitter poll about this, and AMT is used pretty heavily to manage fleets of workstations.
Was that a scientific Twitter poll?
No, not at all.
And so why are you bringing these stats into our conversation when it's completely unscientific?
Because we know that some people are using it. That's all I wanted to find out.
Fair enough.
So anyway, but on the workstation space, AMT is the AMT proper, not the serial over LAN, is used pretty extensively.
So what we're discovering is, much like Active Directory, you hate any technology that makes a sysadmin's job easier.
Let me think about that for a second.
You want them out managing...
You're pretty much right, yes.
Yeah. You want them out there using punch cards to apply patches. That's what you want.
All I'm saying is we didn't have North Korea and Iran and China and Russia hacking stuff when we were on punch cards. Let's just not forget that.
I'm having trouble debating that logic. There's... unassailable truth there.
Yep, that's right.
I mean, unless you want to consider hacking as in hitting something with a sword or sharpened object repeatedly, in which case they were doing all sorts of that.
And they were highly susceptible to fires, I suppose. So, anyway, moving on to the next story here, which also comes from hackernews.com, and the title is "Beware, Microsoft PowerPoint hack installs malware without requiring macros." Holy cow.
Yeah, that's kind of scary.
So, everybody knows, I think most everybody knows, macro viruses are en vogue again, party like it's 1997. And,
wait, did you just quote Prince and Madonna in one sentence?
Yes. Well, that would have been 99. I was trying to be a little different. But anyway, back on track. Thank you.
Good luck with that.
So there's been a lot of discussion about disabling macros, Office macros in your environment, and Office 2016 gives you a pretty easy way to do that. And there's been some discussion about how to do it in older versions as well. And that's still pretty good advice. But the deal here is some enterprising hackers have figured out that you can embed PowerShell into PowerPoint documents, and that PowerShell, even if macros are disabled, right, that PowerShell will activate on hovering over a link with your mouse.
That is harsh.
Now it, it's not quite that bad because it does actually pop up a notice, and it asks you to proceed, right? So it's not like completely transparent to the user, but we all know people want to get to their cat videos, so there's probably
absolutely. I mean, what else is the internet for?
Right. There's probably some easy social engineering ways to get people to click on the button.
But this is kind of interesting because we've taught people to hover over links.
Yes, exactly. Right. Exactly.
And for it to drop a PowerShell code, script basically, and run it, it's pretty gnarly.
It's fantastic.
And this again was discovered in the wild. This wasn't, a theoretical work done by a researcher. This is out there.
Yeah, so I think this goes into the bucket of things that you should be talking to your employees about, and also looking at working with your anti-malware providers to figure out how do you block this? Does your application whitelisting engine block it? Does your antivirus block it? That sort of thing. So,
well, I'm hoping that perhaps there'll be a patch out from Microsoft to disable this sort of capability. I can't think of a valid reason hovering over a link in a PowerPoint needs to execute PowerShell scripting.
I fear the response is going to be working as designed, but you could be right.
Yeah,
we'll see.
What a random thing. It makes you wonder how people stumble upon some of this stuff sometimes.
Aliens.
Illegal? Wait, illegal aliens?
Not
what are we
right.
saying here exactly?
It's aliens. Come on.
Undocumented admins?
Yes, that's right. That's right. We're going to build a firewall, and we're going to keep them out. Documented admins, that is. So, anyway, that is the stories for today.
Yeah, it's been a relatively quiet week.
Yeah, hopefully, I'm hoping for another quiet week. But again, if it's not quiet, it makes for an interesting. As long as it's not too crazy, because then we can't record a show. But
right,
it's always fun to have a little bit of stuff to talk about. So,
well, I'll call up Bob and see if he can release some more, worms or something.
Yeah, there we go. All right, and just a reminder that we definitely appreciate everybody who has contributed to our Patreon campaign. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much.
And we also wanted to remind everybody that we're going to be at DerbyCon.
We are. Louisville, Kentucky.
Yep, that is going to be a good time. Hopefully you can get tickets. And by the way, if you don't have tickets yet, I would say keep an eye on Twitter, because experience has been people go kind of crazy buying them up and then realize that they can't go, and so there's often a lot of people selling tickets. So keep an eye out. Let's see, anything else that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, a couple shout outs. We got asked to make a shout out for TierraCon.
Oh, yeah.
Which goes on in Vegas, July 27th, 28th. It'll be at Caesars in Las Vegas.
Nice.
During Hacker Summer Camp.
Nice.
And this is all about women in security and technology. So, cool little con. We gave a shout out last year, and apparently some of our listeners found some other cool friends, so it was useful to them, which is great. Good. So we thought we'd make a shout out. We won't be there because
somebody's got to work while everybody's partying out there, right? Not that I'm bitter or anything.
Mm-hmm. But heads up to that, so check it out if you're interested in that. What else? We should, as far as we know, be at O'Reilly's second security conference coming up in New York at the end of October, beginning of November.
That's right.
We may have a little panel or something, maybe. We'll see.
Yep.
I don't know that we can officially announce that yet, can we?
No.
We'll leave it as a tease.
That's right.
And something else I will leave as a tease: a writing project I have finally finished with O'Reilly. It's not a book. You won't see it in a bookshelf, but it is something I've been working on for a long time that should start getting posted soon. I think I can start talking about that. Hopefully, by the time this goes out, maybe even I can start spamming some of my work that I did for O'Reilly out to the interwebs.
Awesome.
I think that's all I got.
Good deal. All right. Well, we're going to try to make it 3 times in a row next week. Anyway, have a good week.
We're going to have to work harder to come up with things to talk about if we're going to go that often.
Oh, I know. And just a reminder, you can find all the stories we talked about today and all of our previous episodes on our website at www.defensivesecurity.org. You can follow the show on Twitter at DefensiveSec. You can follow Mr. Kellett on Twitter at Lurg and me on Twitter at MaliciousLink. And with that, we will talk again hopefully next week.
Have a great week, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.